Thanks, Caroline. Morning, everybody. How many of you spent any significant time in operations? That's a good number. Because it's a tough game, isn't it? Living in the operations environment. I spent most of my career in telecoms R&D and BT. But I did spend 4 years, very enjoyable years in operations. Part of the 21st Century Network initiative within BT back in 2004 and 2006. And I learned some very, very significant lessons about how hard it is to switch operations and change the way it does things. So really the tenor of my talk here is going to be really about how hard it is, but then not to say that's because we can't do anything, but just to really get firmly in our minds about what we're up against in terms of dramatic change in the telecoms environment. So telecoms is hard, isn't it? Klaus, you talked about 122 million cells growing from something like 2.3 million cells. So that's really just an example of the moving pieces of networks. And when you do that expansion and migration, you have to keep the existing systems working. And it's absolutely impossible to contemplate that the telecoms network would fall over even for a few seconds if you've got a service level guarantee to the City of London for delivering a financial service where 1 millisecond of an outage is measured and then counted against you in terms of your service level guarantee. So everyone relies on it. We rely on it, governments rely on it, health and safety relies on it, security relies on it. So services need to be maintained continuously 24/7 and through successive waves of technology change. When I was back in my 20s, I think, Jago, you said the internet wasn't around when you were a kid. Well, when I was 21 and I could afford to buy a telephone service from my apartment, I was told it would take 60 days to get my telephone, right? 60 days. Who remembers 60 days to get a telephone service? But we're really talking about millions of endpoints, aren't we? The reason it took 60 days was because a lot of manual processes to do that. A telephone line had to be strung up. Some configuration of a Strowger exchange had to happen. Somebody had to put some plugs in. There's a lot of manual processes there. We're really long past that. But in the telecoms game, literally, there is some movement of physical pieces that happen in today's world, whether it be to plug a box into a rack or to deliver a piece of CPE to a customer. There's a lot of manual processes there. And one of the guys in my team in BT wrote a process diagram, very similar to one I think, Klaus, you put up. You put up this squiggly blackboard process thing. Well, I actually saw a real process diagram that Peter Willis drew. And what Peter was trying to do was to identify in the very complex process to provision a data service for BT Global Services, that this is the actual process that actually has to happen before a bank in, say, Beijing can be given a data service from BT Global Services. And that was very complex. And one of the processes that Peter was very interested in was a process that took 3 months. So you have this really, really slick things happen, box goes to the rack, somebody delivers a piece of equipment somewhere, and then there's a 3-month gap. What's that? So we went and looked at that. And that gap was to import the piece of equipment from the manufacturer to the remote location, going through all the paperwork and import processes before it actually landed up in a distribution center somewhere in the country, having all the signatures. Remember, in our industry, technology moves from point A to point B. But point A may be in, say, the United States, and point B may be, I'll pick a random country, Kenya. But there's an import process that has to take place, right? And are we compliant with technology transfer regulations? So this is a really, really complex game. And automation today is actually applied significantly across the network. We wouldn't be able to run any of our telecoms networks today without a very significant amount of automation. And we're always trying to find cost reductions. We're looking at where can processes be improved Where can manpower be reduced? Where can things be sped up? I mean, we've been doing that for 100 years in telecoms, literally 100 years. Our industry is, as going back to Alexander Graham Bell, if that was the guy that really did invent the telephone, it really is. And over that, OSS and BSS has evolved. It's not like it's been standing still. It has actually been evolved, but systems have been built on top of systems. And even today, field engineers have got very sophisticated algorithms. It's not just a traveling salesman thing. You know, a job occurs, you send the engineer there. How long is the engineer going to be there for? You try and predict that. And then he goes for another job. And you try and make that really efficient, not just so that his life is easy and he's not stuck in traffic in London, but he's actually getting to the job at the prescribed time that the business or the consumer expects him to arrive. So all of these things are really, really fine-tuned and have been fine-tuned over decades. But isn't it really good that networks are cool again? There was a time, probably the 1990s, when not much was happening. We were just trying to really do a lot of cost reduction. Broadband was only just beginning to be thought about. And then really, it was really in the 1970s and 80s. Maybe it's just me, but in the 1970s, when I was at BT Labs, you know, we were doing things like fabricating fibers and erbium doped fiber amplifiers, and we were suddenly switched from microwaves being the big thing to, to fiber being the big thing. And then in the 1980s, as we really started to see computer automation being applied to networks, it really got quite exciting. And then it all got pretty boring for a while, didn't it? And then suddenly NFV and SDN have appeared out of the woodwork back in 2012. And we can conceive of networks that are built using computer technology, and it's really cool. But it's really hard, because what we've now got to do is we've got to figure out how we're going to do network design and implementation in a completely new way in an industry that has been fine-tuned over decades to operate against all of these parameters of resilience and reliability. And there's not much new on here that hasn't been said already, but service continuity imperatives are not going to disappear. Imagine you're flying in an Airbus A380, and somebody says, well, actually, we need to change all the engines. Well, it's not going to happen while it's in flight, is it? You've got to land it, take the passengers off, and then do something with it. What typically happens is another Airbus A380 replaces that one, but we can't do that in telecoms, can we? We can't replace the existing network overnight. Somehow you've got to figure out how you're going to migrate from today's way of doing things to this radically new way of doing things. And so I think it was Klaus or Diego said simplicity. The big thing about, for me, why simplicity is important, it's not just about reducing the number of process steps. It's not just about reducing the amount of analysis that needs to be done. It's about how the human that is going to be the guy that says yes or no, I'm going to deploy this, or why did that happen that took out those customers, and what about the hacks that we've all been reading about? Simplicity is key to understanding what's going on. Although when I say simplicity, underneath the hood, it can be very complex, but the instrumentation needs to be intelligent enough or sophisticated enough to abstract complexity to simplicity, so that the operations guy can, if he wants, dig down and find out what happened. Okay? And then also, in terms of improving things, not only what happened in the past, but how can we do it better in the future? And none of this is going to be plain sailing, by the way. So the reason we're here, and why I'm working with Klaus and Diego to figure out how we do this, is we've not really tackled the OSS issue up until now for NFV. When we brought together the NFV community back in 2012, we were criticized because we didn't have OSS in the picture. We had a blob with OSS, and we basically said, that's outside our remit. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that all of the machinery for the new telecommunications networks of the future, this is how it will all work, cloud native, thanks Dave, and how we do NFV and SDN, that's just the stuff that goes on at the network layer. What happens at OSS? We said we parked that. And part of the reason we parked that was because OSS people are really hard to get. So all you guys that put your hands up, however many of you are currently OSS people as your day job? So a lot of you have spent time in operations like I have, so I know the problem space, but I got out of it as soon as I could. Why? Because it's really, really difficult job to do. And I think you said it really well, Diego. Give them more freedom. I remember one guy, he'd written a script to do some configuration. I think it's dial-up, BT's dial-up platform. He'd written a script that could do really fast configuration and fault analysis, digging up data from Cisco routers. And he'd written that script, and he'd been busy operating it. Didn't tell anybody, but he got rewarded because the job was being done really well. Because he knew his job so well that he knew how to do it better. And he had the freedom in his particular role. How many of those people have got that freedom? Probably not too many. And then, unfortunately, OSS is not going away. So those of you that isn't your day job, it's going to be around for quite a long time, isn't it? So, however, there's a couple of messages on here I really wanted to emphasize. The work stack. OSS has a work stack, and it's continuously there. And back in the day when I was a client for 21C Access, and I wanted to get stuff onto the 21C and Access OSS work stack, the answers coming back from the teams was not very nice. It said, well, Don, I think we can get to that in 18 months. I go, 18 months? Literally, 18 months. And then 3 months later, Don, I can't give you a date because we've just had a regulatory imperative imposed upon us, and the work stack has been reprioritized to deal with a regulatory imperative. So that's what telecom. Can you imagine Google being told that, sorry, you're going to have a regulatory initiative now. You can't do anything for the next 18 months. In our world, regulators are omnipresent, and they're always making changes for us. And then the market forces are changing, and then business imperatives are changing. The CEO changes. Suddenly you have a new vision for the future of the network. What's that going to do to the OSS teams and the work stack? So in reality, I guess this is kind of like a message, Klaus, I wasn't sure what you want me to say, is OSS transformation is not going to happen anytime soon, right? These systems are not going to be changed overnight. They're going to migrate and they're going to evolve. Our job, and this is why Network Service Management Initiative that Klaus is putting together is so important, is we need to join this up now. We need to join up all of those people around the NFV, cloud native stuff that's going on at the network layer with the best thinking that is going on in the OSS layer. But they're not here, are they? These guys need to be here in these kinds of forums telling us how they would improve their environment and how they think we should insert virtualization into the future networks. And they'll love it, and give them the chance to do that. And collaboration is key. I think that, Diego, you said, it all looks the same. So the reason that NFV is a collaborative activity is it's really important that it looks the same when it comes to the technology pieces, because we need scale. Software providers need lots of different customers for the same package. They need to see common requirements, because they can't have an example for Cox Communications and BT and a different one. That's not efficient. That's not innovative. The innovation comes from how we deploy and how we operate the systems. So the key to success in the marketplace isn't how the technology that you use, it's how you use it. And how quickly can you bring new things to market. All of that is dependent on operations being much faster and more slick. So we know what the vision for NFV is. The idea is that you're no longer constrained to traditional functions. You can deliver packets by any means that you want. I've talked about the fact that you don't need some of the old protocols anymore. Will IP go away? What about information-centric networking? Could we do things with intent-based networking instead of having to do programmatic networking? All those things are really exciting, but we need to bring some of these people together in a new place, or a place where they can start to sit down. And Klaus, we need operations people. So for you in Deutsche Telekom, I challenge you to go and get OSS people. Diego, you need to go in and get OSS people. I'm in CableLabs, so I don't have to get any OSS people. But literally, okay, so who here is a network operator individual? Few of you. You probably know how hard it is to get those people, right? There was a code red at the weekend. The guy's not turning up to your meeting now, right? These people are really under pressure all the time. So the challenge for us is to give it enough importance that we're not going to be able to use NFV unless we transform our operations and have a roadmap for that. And we need those people here. So that's my message. Thank you very much.